obviously at some point when inflation becomes aggressive enough, people are pushed to do like very, very risky things. It pushes the decision making to the outer edges of what's safe.
All right, welcome to what's going to be a great, not only conversation, but a series of conversations with my friend Carter Wetzel. Carter, thanks for hanging.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is going to be a fun marathon of content that we're going to be rolling out here, and there's a lot to be examined because there's very big questions about why is the world the way it is, and why does it feel like it's getting worse? What are the pieces that are contributing to it, and ultimately, like, what can we do about it? And these are hard
Yeah,
questions.
so we agreed that this is more than just a single conversation. You actually used the word podcast series. So, well, it's big, whatever this ends up being. Can you synthesize the vision for this into almost kind of a movie trailer for people? What are we cracking open here? Like, what's the goal with this series of long form conversations? Where do you see us going?
You know, the way I see it is that trust in the 21st century is evolving and devolving rapidly at the same time. The tools and the means by which we can build trust in society and transact with each other and build better systems has never been in a better place. At the same time, the amount of noise and the opportunity for human greed to come in and misleverage those systems, or co-opt the world in a direction that isn't as trust built as it could be, is a huge problem. And so we're really trying to break down, like, where are we seeing all these problems emerge, because there's many different perspectives, from the integrity of currency itself to the integrity of people themselves and how that's evolving, to the impacts of social media and how communities form. Like, there's a very broad range of topics that all feed into the trust problem. And we want to try to get to the bottom of this financial nihilism that's emerging, this sense that people have of, like, the system is so screwed up. There's so many cards stacked against me that, like, screw it. I'm gonna kind of give into despair, and I'm going to start making unwise financial decisions. We want to investigate and discover, where is that behavior coming from, right? Um, and what are the solutions to it? So it's like the series can be very, very macro focused, but we're also want to bring it back to the individual, how, like, the real stories of people that are being impacted by such large systems that they don't have they're working 40, 50 hours a week. They have a family, they're strapped up food on the table. How the heck are they supposed to navigate, or even have it? They feel like they can't even have impact on those things. It's so above and beyond them that they know that it's controlling them. And so we want to dig into the psychology of these individuals. We do want to make this about the stories of people and the impact on them, but we want to start from a very data-driven, high-level macro, what's all feeding into the individual. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I'd love to hear your version of it too. That's kind of it is a podcast series, so there's room for the hosts to have different perspectives on what we're going to tackle here.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. And there are different altitudes at which you can view the situation, right? I mean, I think the term macroeconomics, that is more familiar to now the everyday citizen than they ever want. They're more familiar with macro now than they ever wanted to be. And macro is like the 30,000 foot view, right? Or get a drone up there and you can see what the land looks like from above. You can maybe see some patterns. We'll certainly go there. I think both of us kind of had the sense that today it's almost better to kick it off on the ground level. Like, let's get to the street level, look at what it feels like to be an average person who is not a billionaire living in this economic environment. What does that look like? And I guess the word picture that sort of came to my mind to set this up. Uh, have you ever seen this viral video of the guys that were they're ice climbing this iceberg,
Got
and it flips over while they're
huh.
climbing. Have you ever seen that?
I think I have. I know. I think I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
I'll like when we produce this, I'll like edit it in so people can watch it while we're doing that. But people are very familiar, I think, with the concept of iceberg, right? It's 15% mass above the water line and something like 85% down. And it feels like this financial climate, if we are to liken it to an iceberg, people are trying to climb, right? They're trying to make it. They're trying to ascend to a level of reasonable prosperity and health for their family. But what's happening, just like in this video, is that everything below the water line that we couldn't see is now being flipped. And people are having to survive that. And of course, at the same time, it's probably fair to say, propaganda coming from the other side that, no, no, this isn't real. Like, it looks like your arm is bleeding, but that's just a giant freckle on your arm. Like, it's not real. And people are being gaslighted with words like Vibecession, that, oh, this is just like people with, poor sentiments on social media. Like, there isn't real concrete data to that. So that's where we'll start. I'm just going to throw some raw data on the table to kick us off, to show what is clearly visible above the water line. And then, I kind of just want to pass the baton to you, and like then we'll kick it and go from there. But any other thoughts about that or before?
No, let's do it. I think I'm excited to hear some of these
And
stats.
we'll throw these up on the screen here for people, but you and I are looking at them now. Um, so I got dumped into this idea of Vibecession recently, where like the sentiment at the other side is saying economy's not bad, job is good, stock market's up, it's at all-time highs with like a Buffett indicator, things like that. And so basically, if you feel like something's wrong with the economy, something's wrong with you, stop bringing down the
Mhm.
vibe. And uh, I already said what we think about that. So we're trying to look at, okay, what can we all clearly visibly see above that waterline? And here's a few charts, a couple that we'll share here. So this first one, this depicts each of the recent three generations at age 25. So, like, basically, what was your grandpa's life like at age 25? Your dad at age 25, and then you, financial status. How much money did you make? That's what this is depicting. And you can see for all these categories: pre-tax income, annual cost of college as a percentage of income, and then house price to income. Each generation is subsequently worse. Like, and it's actually come to be a pretty enormous disparity here that is undeniable. So yes, that's not just like a freckle on your arm. People are bleeding. That's what we see from this
Just
first
curious
one
about that
here.
one. If you just hop in super quick,
Yeah.
is that the pre-tax income, like the inflation component? So not only is this generation earning less dollars, their money has lost significantly more value in a compressed time period than their grandparents and parents did. So less income, everything else is more expensive, and inflation is it's fundamentally just massive.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point, that the acceleration at which this has taken place in the last 4 years it's like going from 2 miles an hour to 80 miles per hour very, very
Yes.
quickly. And for people to adjust to that psychologically, I haven't even thought
Yep.
about that. It's like the whole world spun around and you woke up in a different place, basically.
Yep. So some of it's like it's not as if grandparents and parents didn't feel the impacts of inflation over time, but it's the compressed nature of it all, and then how that modifies behavior ultimately too. It can create a sense
Yeah.
of kind of hedonism of like, well, if my money's not going to be, and this happens in other like hyperinflationary environments. Like my money is not going to be worth anything in a year, then I should spend it right now. Inflation forces you to spend it now and just consume, or go up the risk curve to try to find investments that are can outpace that inflation. And obviously, at some point when inflation becomes aggressive enough, people are pushed to do very, very risky things. And so that's what happens when there's a lack of integrity in the system. Is it, it pushes the decision making to the outer edges of what's safe.
Yeah, that's a great setup for what I think we'll probably land at in a little bit here is like we're just looking at the raw data, but you're starting to touch on a little bit what is the most successful mentality that we can evolve into in order to survive this landscape because there is a spectrum of health, there's a spectrum of
Mhm.
viability for the different adaptation that people can make here. And I know you have a lot of insight on that, so we'll definitely get there. Yeah, so this one, the cost of owning a home, and the punchline is there on the top right corner of it, with you see the median monthly mortgage in February 2019 versus February 2024. Some other data that's not on this chart though that I did pull. So according to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, home ownership rates for those under 35 have dropped from around 40% in the late 70s to less than 25% today. I wasn't able to find it or to recall it, but I've also seen data over the last year that more people in their 30s than ever who are getting their hands on homes for the first time are having to get help from their parents, from those previous generations who have actually seen the success that is elusive for, say, millennials and younger. So, home ownership rates for Americans under 35, it is at its lowest levels since the Great Depression.
Wow.
Again, I don't know if we could be more clear there, but that's the housing picture. So when we see phrases like, "Oh, is this real?" or the Silk account just retweeted somebody tongue in cheek the other day who was like, guys, inflation's over. Like we're all good. Like the scares are done." It's it's insulting to see the iceberg flipping, to see the blood coming out of people's arms, to hear stories about how people are having to actually shift financial decisions that they're making for their family, to see data like dollars left over after food, gas, personal interest, and rent for median U.S. household. It's down over 20% in the last dozen years. So it's really just degrading to be told this isn't real. Like
Well,
we do
I
it.
mean, the people that say that are people that are sitting on hard assets, right? 61% of Americans own some amount of stock, which means there is roughly 40% of the population doesn't even have any form of investments, right? And then within that 60% that does, it's going to be massively skewed to like a small subset. Um, and so yeah, the people with hard assets right now, they're fine. S&P 500 is at an all-time high. Those are people that maybe own 7 to 10 houses and they purchased them 20 years ago and they've seen a massive increase in value. Granted, you have to account for inflation, but like their needs financially are met. They're fine. They're in the I've already achieved wealth. Now all I have to do is preserve it. And that's a real problem. Wealth preservation is still a real problem for those people. But for everyone else, they're not even in the like, I want to compound my wealth or just like preserve uh, my pot of gold. They're dragging sitting on top of a pot of gold. Everyone else is like, I don't have a pot of gold. Like I got my 10 gold pieces and then it disappears faster and faster every year. And I have to take out more and more credit. And like, how in the world do I climb out of this pit? And then meanwhile, you have social media in half the world gaslighting you that like you're just not working hard enough, that it's a skill issue. And then those are the people that get pushed to the end of the risk curve. Screw it. I'll buy that Ponzi scheme. I'll buy that meme token. I'm gonna, insert whatever vice that isn't great for building up long-term wealth. And it's because they don't know about the tools. And a lot of the tools that people have tried are already built to like work against you in many ways. So
Yeah, yeah. It's like everybody thought they were playing a sport, and we thought we knew the score that was on the scoreboard and how to get points. But it turns out that there is a whole other dimension of play for this game. There's a whole scoreboard that we didn't have access to, which reads very differently than the data that we did have access to. And it's yeah, I guess it's that iceberg flipping upside down. What's below the waterline, people can sense that this thing is moving and it's coming up, and I have to reposition myself so that I don't go underwater and get ended. So, can you say more about uh, what you sense below the waterline that maybe wasn't so visible before, but that we're clearly seeing come to the surface and change the game for people right now?
Well, I think um, inflation that goes on long enough eventually produces social unrest. Um, Inflation as an effect, it's a result of humans spending money they don't have, and then having to pay. That increases the monetary supply. It's like, U.S. government, they're spending money, they're not getting a return on it, and so like your money supply is literally just growing to subsidize this bad spending. So part of it is someone has to pay for inflation, and ultimately it's your everyday consumer. And the problem that the world is now encountering, we went through, call it the last 10, 15 years post 2008 of just monetary supply growing aggressively, but there was enough pre-existing wealth, enough wealth distribution that like it was kind of okay, but slowly but surely, like a hose of water, like the spigot is closing, the pressure and the speed of the stream is becoming, it's hitting you in the face harder and harder. Um, and so in this next stage, they have to try to save this broken system. All these bad, instead of fixing the source of the problem, which is we need to make better financial decisions and not spend money we don't have. That's obviously not gonna. We can't fix that. No, 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 no. Instead, we have to try to, shift our money printer dial to fix this problem. And what ends up happening right now is, inflation happens. Now we're going to raise interest rates to try to, increase the cost of capital and try to shrink that money supply. But in the process of doing that, now you're going to see unemployment start to skyrocket. You have business because credit and all these businesses that were, they're already kind of surviving inflation and consumer behavior changing, but now they're dealing with, um, and the very high interest rates playing jacked up all of a sudden. Unemployment in the United States right now is around 4.2%. Right around 4.4 to 4.5 is when you see massive social unrest. So I think what everyone is feeling invisibly is inflationary pressure, and now unemployment is going to start creeping up as a social force as they have to try to react to the lack of integrity within spending and within money printing. Someone has to pay for it, and it's going to be in the form of unemployment, I think, in the next stage.
Interesting. Wow, that's a really interesting threshold that I wasn't aware of there. I'm not sure if you used the word yet, but I know it's kind of a part of your thesis with the financial nihilism piece. The idea of the gambit,
Hmm.
that as people figure out that the game has changed, that things have shifted, and they're they've kind of been cut out and are being negatively impacted by it. As you mentioned a minute ago, people then take potentially increasing amount of risks to try to catch back up. Like that's the idea of
Hmm.
gambit. Could you maybe walk us through a little bit uh, of that idea and kind of a risk spectrum almost of strategies that you see people adopting to adapt to a changed
Yeah,
game?
absolutely. I mean, I think so fundamentally, to get a return on investment, there has to be some form of risk. You're buying an asset with an unknown future, or you're lending capital to someone that should be able to pay you back, but you don't know for sure, or you're betting, you're literally, clicking a slot machine and the odds are stacked against you, but you still play anyway. So the Usually, the higher the risk, the higher the reward. That's just kind of the general free market is capable of kind of finding that distribution depending on the opportunity you're trying to participate in. But the point is that these, back in the day, buying a bond and giving yourself like call it 4% yield. Back in the day, it was like that's a worthy return. 4% can go a long ways just because inflation was low enough. But right now, inflation is aggressive enough and has been compounded aggressive enough and has eaten enough into people's purchasing and savings that 4% for people doesn't tangibly move the needle in a way that's going to change their life in a way that like on a short time frame. I'm talking like because there's people that they don't need to play with a 10, 20 year horizon with their capital. They probably have, they're probably in the red already. So how can you build out savings when you're already having to take on debt within the system? Right. So I would say the sliders are how much debt does a person have? That's probably the biggest deciding how stable is your ability to function in your everyday life. And the less stable that is, the more likely you are to take a bigger gambit. Evidence for this is that sports betting in the United States has seen an exponential rise in the last 5 years. And an initial naive look at it would just be like, oh, like the apps got better or like the tools are now here, the regulation is there to allow it. And it's like I look at it and like, no, like that's financial nihilism played out in its most raw way. People love sports. It's a distraction from their everyday life. It's something that you can tribalistically attach your identity to, right? So that's a huge sense of like almost like spiritual relief within life. Like, you know what? Maybe I'm deep in debt. Maybe I'm really struggling, but like I'm gonna watch that team and like when they win, I win. Like, there's that emotional attachment within sports. But now you can combine the tribalism and sense of individual and group identity to a financial gambit.
Yeah.
It's everything someone could ever ask for who has entered into a state of nihilism. It's two birds, one stone. As crypto people, we see the gambit played out more with meme coins or with people that like they buy an asset that becomes their tribe. They're never going to sell the asset and they derive a sense of group. The group identity is more important than the financial return. I think crypto has some of those weird dynamics. But I guess long and short, my biggest evidence that this financial nihilism thing is real is crypto, and it's the increase in the number of people participating in raw gambling. And there's people that, like in government, you're gonna see it. They're gonna say we need to outlaw gambling, we need to outlaw sports. But once again, you're treating the symptom and not the cause. There's a reason more and more people are trying to gamble. So you can try to like bottle that up and try to prevent people from kind of like the prohibition days. You can try to bottle it up and try to fix it. But like all the drinking that happened during prohibition wasn't because of um drinking was more readily accessible. It is because of all the other conditions that pushes a person to choose the path. So treat the cause, not the symptom. And in America, we're very bad at that.
Yeah. Yeah. I So, and what I hear you saying is that debt, and I hadn't thought about this in the context of your thesis before, but like part of the risk return level that someone adopts is going to be contingent on what their debt looks like. How bad are they hurting? How much ground do they need to make up?
Mhm.
And I mean, you're so right with like for our grandparents, the 4% bond or something like, oh, that's so amazing. But when USD has bled to a compound inflation rate of 25% over the last 5 years, you have to find a way to make that up, or your wealth is bleeding. You're
And
losing.
there's social forces too, like the rise of social media as kind of this universal platform that we all participate in. That really only emerged in the last 15 years. This is like in terms of like human history, this is a very short time frame. So not only do you have like debt and monetary forces, you also have social forces. Every day someone, pulls up their phone and they have all this they have their peers presenting certain lifestyles to them. You have
Mhm.
people with the new cars, new clothes, new relationships, traveling. all of those social forces screaming at you that you don't have enough, and your bank account is agreeing with you, agreeing that you don't have enough. So how the heck I want to be them. I want those pieces over there. It seems obtainable. It's getting shoved in my face all the time that everyone seems to be winning and I'm the only one that's losing. What's wrong? What's wrong that I'm doing? What's wrong about me? And I think that's when things get really dark. I think there's like a level of shame. There's a level of like, and, like every individual, like psychologically, is gonna like respond differently to all those pressures. But I just want to bring it up, like within our exploration of financial nihilism, the reason I think this is so fascinating is because this problem is multivariant to the nth degree. There are hundreds of variables that get us here. And a lot of people in crypto were very confident talking about the monetary side. But I'd like to go deeper. I like to hit 5 to 10 of the biggest contributing factors. I'd like to go beyond just money as the solution within this series. And it is a solution, it is a tool. But I want to see how deep we can go.
Yeah. Do you want to tease any more of that right now, or not right now?
I mean, you've seen the chapters and some of the concepts, and part of this is we're still building this out on the fly, and part of it is um we'll see where the winds blow, you know. But yeah, if you have some you want to share, I'm all yours.
Oh, no, I think that's good. I just didn't know if your brain was gonna want to, unpack that right now. But let's go here if you're game. So to kind of summarize some of what we're both saying is that this financial climate, it's real, it's a real thing. People on the street level are being impacted, and in direct corresponding with their plight, many people are adopting financial strategies that are very high risk and pretty low probability of paying off for them. In which case, when it doesn't pay off, if that coin doesn't pay off, or if that gamble on your favorite sports team doesn't pay off, you are then in worse state than before, as you were trying to do something to help yourself. So to bring in some solutions a little bit here, what would you say about a more healthy, I don't even know if you would call it a gambit, but like more healthy strategies that you would point people to consider and to begin learning about in order to adapt to this environment?
Yeah, I think there's really two pieces of the puzzle. There's income and there's expenses, right? If we're going to talk purely about the financial side and maybe not about the social and spiritual side of this equation, but there's income and there's expenses. And for a lot of people, this is part of the reason why it's so intense, is how do you improve your income when education is as expensive as it is? So like the income side of the problem is like really hard for people. The expenses side, I would say there people can try to cut corners, but even that's why like people are very cemented in their everyday expenses. I would argue that I think there's probably social pressure for certain purchases that people could probably clean up. Like there's a general financial literacy that this generation has kind of not been taught, has been lost. So I think like education around expenditure management is a big one that can be done collectively. But then I also think the currency side of things, it is the people sitting with dollars, they're spending it as fast as they can get because they don't feel like they can trust dollars anymore, right? So I think exploring the topic of what tools exist for them to save money, or at least just retain their purchasing power, to try to get the chin above water, and giving and showing people like the stats and the math on like what it would take if you know you're living paycheck to paycheck and you maybe have like 5 to 10% extra maybe on like a weekly basis. What can you, instead of spending that 5 10% on like sports gambling or meme coin or like insert consumeristic habit, like what can you do to actually compound yourself into retaining purchasing power, start earning passive income to actually try to help climb out of the hole? And it's hard. That takes time. It takes patience in a world that's telling you not to have patience. It takes trusting things like certain types of crypto that are very, very new. And the world has burned you a lot. Every corner that you've turned to has really burned you. And that's why you resort to the gambit, right? So can we replace
Yeah,
the unhealthy gambit with the healthy gambit? And what does the healthy gambit look like?
yeah, that's good. And I guess the two categories of assets that are indispensable to that type of more measured approach, where we're not like jumping off a cliff without a parachute anymore, but we're actually like kind of trying to build an airplane for ourselves. The two assets that come to my mind are hard assets, right? Um, Something like Bitcoin, something like gold. That's kind of an obvious play that's going to benefit from inflation directly, right? But then on the other side, and I think this flies a little bit more under the radar, especially for people who aren't aware of Silk yet, but stable assets that are not tied to what's going to go on with USD or other fiat currencies, but stable assets that are designed to preserve purchasing power over time. And my thesis, which we've shared before in conversations, is that measured volatility is actually the most honest approach to stable asset design. In other words, we can't say 100 is stable because yay, it's a dollar. Um, we need to, at this point in where we are economically, we need a better definition of stability that actually includes a small measured dose of volatility, like so. That's why it includes a little bit of Bitcoin and gold in its peg, so that there is some appreciation there to help people stay above the
Hmm.
waterline. And like over the last year, I mean, you tweeted recently, SIP beat USD by 9.5%. So people are preserving that purchasing power over time. And it's the answer is different for different people, but it would seem like, as far as risk diversification, most portfolios should include those hard assets. They're rare, scarce, valuable, going to increase and appreciate. And not only those, but assets that are stable, but designed to preserve purchasing power over time. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, completely agree. The 9.5% is quite significant, and eventually you're gonna have products where you can lend out silk and you can earn, additional opportunities. So then you get up to like the 12-15% bracket, and that starts to be compelling. That outpaces inflation. And if the rails are there to seamlessly transition back to everyday purchase, it's like take the paycheck, turn it into silk, and when it's time to spend, you spend. Right? That's the dream. But now you're coming from a world that like you're not default holding a currency that's working against you. You're default holding a currency that's hedged against the economy around you that's actually kind of designed to keep you down. And then when you actually go and interact with it, you seamlessly switch back. And I think I don't know if it's this generation. I don't know if it's maybe like the 2030s. I don't even know what you call those, the Gen Z Zers, Gen Z squared, or whatever name they're gonna have. I think they're gonna be natively multi-currency. Just like we're natively phone users, like the people born in the call it 1995 and onwards, they're all digitally native. I think we're gonna enter into a multi-currency native world, because we're gonna have to. It's not going to be by
Yeah.
choice. It's going to be because survival dictates the work and the income I produce needs to be stored in something that protects me.
So what would that day to day look like for that person? Like functionally, what are they doing on their phone, or how are they moving assets? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big pivot's going to come when companies start paying people out in things other than dollars. And I still think we're on the front. I mean, we're starting to see the early stages of that. I was even reading like on Base, which is the Coinbase's layer 2. They now have a new point of sale systems that are integrated with coffee shops, which it started kind of mean Carter was talking about coffee shops, right? The ultimate barometer. Um, but now people are able to buy coffee with USDC, which granted USDC is a dollar peg stablecoin, so isn't quite there. But what I'm trying to say is I think the gap is going to shrink between this previously siloed off world of crypto that has mostly been a casino. it's been mostly like these risk curve people that just want price to go up. When the truth is, the real power of crypto is that it's stable tools for stable living, something to that effect. And once businesses start paying people out in crypto and these rails become better, I don't think there's going to be too much of a difference in terms of like user experience. Like when you go shopping and you swipe a card or scan a phone, it'll just be paying with a different currency. In the interim, we're still in this weird phase where you kind of have to be digitally savvy enough to have money over in the silo and be smart enough to like hop it back over to everyday life. But I think that that gap is actually closing as we speak, pretty
Yeah,
aggressively. Hmm.
that's going to become more
Hmm.
seamless. Um,
And then well, and that's
so
the thing
this is
about the education of like now the UX gap is closed. Now, how quick can people onboard into this new digital system that protects them?
yeah, yeah. So this question is really speculative, and you can just feel free to shrug it off if you'd like, or if you want to like go dive in head first, we can do that too. Um, so I'm imagining that iceberg flipping, right? It's going to happen. Like the financial order of things is shaping reshaping out of necessity. Given specifically, if we want to point to just one factor, it's the debt, right? And everybody knows these numbers: $35 trillion of debt for the United States. It's $250,000 for every individual taxpayer. It's $100,000 for every citizen, man, woman, and child in the United States. It's the cost of interest alone is more than the funding for the United States military every year. And that 35 trillion figure doesn't even count the all-in liabilities of $175 trillion that have been borrowed from the future, because that's what debt is at the essence. We have borrowed from the future. And not only has the government done that in the United States, but citizens, that's been a mentality in a time of prosperity as well. The latest numbers that I've seen is that household debt in the US is $1.14 trillion. So that's a lot of debt that people have stacked up. And it seems like in this, I'll call it a greater reset that is coming. Um, as as things get flipped around, as the dollar loses its spot in the top of the leaderboard as the global reserve currency for the world, we know that's coming, right? It's a 10 to 15-year process every time, and we're 10 years deep in it. We could go into all kinds of data to see that happening. Um, I'm curious, and I wonder if we wake up in 5 years, what is the price that has been paid by the individual citizen for that? Let me like tease a little bit more. My mind went here because you brought up USDC, and it's no secret that you've mentioned before that USDC could be maybe kind of a Trojan horse for a central bank digital currency from the United States that already has inroads, already has railroads, already has legal pathway, adoption within crypto, complete visibility, zero privacy, all of that. And I just wonder if you have thoughts about a day where we wake up and people have traded maybe debt forgiveness and a new financial system for zero
Mm,
privacy, complete transparency, financial surveillance. I don't want you like doomsday about
yeah.
any of that, but just throwing it out there for you to interact with if you have
Have you heard
thoughts.
of the cathedral and the bazaar analogy before?
Really?
So essentially, with the originally software, this is like pre-open source myth was very much like you have your standalone, very powerful companies driving different pieces of software development. And people kind of say, well, we have this big centralized force. You can build something beautiful like the cathedral, right? Because everyone's fixated on the same thing, playing by the same rules, and you got your cathedral. Then like open source movement comes in and says, oh, there's beauty in the bazaar. There's beauty in the chaos of this, bustling market. And so maybe the bazaar can't make a cathedral, but it's much more dynamic and lively. And I picture like the U.S. dollar is like a cathedral. It's in its own way, beautiful in the sense that it has coordinated trillions of dollars worth of value coordination. And it's a shame that it's being corrupted, but it is a the US dollar as a thing has been like incredibly powerful and impactful in human history. But I think crypto is the bazaar. Crypto is the disintermediation of the cathedral. Um, and the question is when the cathedral collapses, you're essentially asking what comes next. And has there been another Trojan horse cathedral that everyone's going to be ushered into forcefully, or will the bazaar stand strong and we'll say, no, come to us, come find me in the bazaar, which is very hard to do. That's the coming battle, and I personally view like there's definitely a world where like the social fabric breaks down in ways that none of us can imagine. Like, as in, yeah, it's kind of like the doomsday scenario, but I think think about governance collapsing down to its most local level, and I picture communities rallying together to use a meme, kind of millions of sub DAO. I mean, that's what like little communities of people are. We're all little sub DAOs, but I picture just a big fracturing into a bazaar, and then currencies kind of embedding into these different groups, and then trust being rebuilt instead of from the top down but from the ground up, that the social fabric completely flips. And it's only possible because we have tools that are censorship resistant and have privacy but also usability and verifiability. Like, never in human history have we been able to have those types of tools in the everyday layman to be able to flip from cathedral to bazaar. But the powers that be desperately are trying to stop the transformation from the cathedral into the bazaar. But in many ways, the bazaar is our only way out. It's the only like true. It's a free market of just untapped energy and potential not be ushered in and enforced into one direction. So I view the coming chaos as something that's going to be utterly painful, but one of the most interesting times in human history to be alive. Like, it is crazy what I think we're on the verge of. And they'll have to choose. We'll see how violent the world gets. We'll see how much the fabric of trust breaks down. But I'd like to see it rebuilt, and I think we have the tools to do it in a more fair and a more trusted way, in a more localized way, in a way that reflects. We need to rebuild trust in a way that reflects that no single entity can possibly control um the chaos of the world. You can't there's the layers of trust and how that's exponentially growing and becoming more complicated and more interconnected. The cathedral does not work. So down with the cathedral, blah blah the bazaar. That's that way how I
Yeah.
think.
Well, it's funny that you say that because as I heard you describe that, what my mind did with the most probabilistic scenario is that we end up with what may be an even bigger cathedral
Mm,
and a flourishing bazaar right outside of it.
maybe.
So it seems possible that in this financial reset that the U.S. government or other governments maybe forgive debt, hand citizens an app and say, here's your new digital ID. You have this amount of USDC or whatever, like transparent funding loaded on it. This is your everything here on the app. All you got to do is download it and participate. Like, that would be a pretty big cathedral. But then right outside, that doesn't necessarily preclude our participation in all the benefits of a bazaar, where there are opportunities, some of them that are wildly risky and are, maybe not to be encouraged, but also opportunities and tools and products like full stack financial privacy that you could easily build for yourself with the ability to spend silk in real life, Shades, DeFi Suite, all of that. So where my mind went is I think we might get an even bigger cathedral, more control. It's possible. But I think that bazaar still thrives. And hopefully we can move back and forth without
I was gonna
citations.
say
All right.
that's where my head jumped, is like So is it the cathedral door and they got 40 guards with pikes pointed outwards towards the bazaar, and you gotta come up and turn your papers in, and they let you in, and now you're trying to leave the cathedral and they're like, no, 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 sorry, you need to stay inside. Like, what is the relationship going to be between the cathedral and the bazaar? The bazaar is already here, but the cathedral is collapsing. But what if the cathedral is reborn? What does the relationship look like?
Mm. Carter, I don't know if I can let this conversation end without asking you your thoughts on, we're already there, like, what happens to the dollar? What happens when this gets reset? What do you think is the most probabilistic outcome, at least in your mind? Is there such a thing as a dollar backed again by hard assets in order to add some truth to money? Maybe even a Bitcoin dollar. We don't have to go too deep there, but I just kind of want to know your thesis if you had one on that.
I guess I envision there's like two routes. Either the US dollar and the government behind it doubles down, and essentially the federal government and the social contract and the trust layer becomes even more centralized, or power is disintermediated back to the states. Federal government shrinks. It gives up this dream of having the omnipresent dollar and tries to kind of like re-embrace and re-decentralize back to the states. And gosh, man, trying to predict that. I mean, generally speaking, humans don't just like willfully hand up power. There's a reason revolutions happen in human history. It's because people are not willing to give up power. And
Yeah,
power tends to beget more power and more control. And the tools to control people have become exponentially more powerful in the modern era. Exponentially more powerful. At the same time, the tools to disintermediate and break apart systems have also become exponentially more powerful. So it's kind of like, how much you want to bet on citizens to reform their own country peacefully or violently? That's kind of like the question to kind of break it down to its core, and then how what happens to the dollar in either of those options. Um, I would need to sit on it. I don't think I can have an answer on the fly, but that's my question always goes back to like the social fabric and that side of things. So the dollar is just it's the sum of all the relationships between people. That's what the
yeah,
dollar is, right?
yeah. I think it would take me back to that cathedral bazaar piece. It feels like both are too big, both have too much to lose for there not to be some sort of symbiosis that is agreed upon between the two. And whether or not that's formalized with something like a Bitcoin dollar or whatever, who's to say? But I gotta believe that uh, both are going to continue to grow. Both are continuing to do their thing. That's what it seems like.
But I will say this is one of the first times in human history where the bazaar has existed in a way that is globally connected. There's always been pockets of people within countries that sidestep and have their own markets, but the fact that it is globally connected, that is a first. And so I think the cathedral and the bazaar as an analogy has always existed. But I think the bazaar is bigger and stronger than ever and is headed in that direction, and the cathedrals are more decrepit, more decaying than ever before. So can the cathedral reinvent itself in time to be able to compete and synergize with the bazaar? Or do all the do the cathedrals collapse and it's just bazaar? Who knows, right? We'll see where it leads. But I just want to acknowledge in good faith that it's not like the bazaar is only just started to exist. It's the fact that it's globally connected. And
Yeah,
also with the social media stuff too, like not just on the financial side, but the social side for people around the world to connect with these ideas and connect their capital to ideas outside of the cathedral is remarkable. It is remarkable, and we have still crypto has just, I think, only begun to touch the social governance layer being tied to capital. Like most of the experiments have just been like proof of stake governance and all, but I think we're like literally at like stage zero, like Bitcoin white paper in 2008 levels with like governance and human social structures interacting with this permissionless, globally accessible capital. Still very, very early stages. And I think that that kind of like not only opting out of capital, but opting out of social structures, that's when things are going to get nuts. Um, and I think it's
Mm,
further down, but that stuff gets me excited too.
yeah. This might be a good spot to put a bookmark in, and then we can open up a fresh chapter next time because we do have so many more angles of this to talk through. But to kind of close it off here, any final thoughts? Like, we tried to give a really honest look at the street level view for average citizens, the reality of the financial landscape they're in, strategies that they're adopting, both healthy and unhealthy, to adapt to succeed in this environment, and maybe what kind of these two alternative stories or two alternative venues that may exist for them in the future with the Cathedral of the Tsar. Any other like footnotes or final postscripts that you would add to
I would
this?
say the postscript is that I think this series is going to be fun to drill in to individual ideas. I think we gave the high level, we kind of floated along, but just if you're a listener of the series, we look forward to not having all the answers, but knowing that there's a thread out there, and we want to follow that thread as far as possible, which is where is this financial nihilism coming from, and what is and are the solutions to it? That's what we're really obsessed with, and yeah, just invite you to come along for the ride as we research this and kind of have a public dialogue, and yeah, be sure to follow along in the journey.
Absolutely, and I think one piece of that I'll toss out is you and I are both very interested, like you mentioned, hearing the real human stories related to
Hmm.
this. So you might see if you see a social media, like a tweet from Carter or from a Shade account or something, and inviting you to share anything about your experience with inflation or how you're adapting to this landscape. Whether it's a DM or a reply on that, like we very much want to hear those type of things for this research project because this isn't just like a curiosity, I think, for you, but you really care about
Yeah.
people. You're really trying to build products that serve people and help create a positive pathway for them. And understanding our listeners better, understanding average citizens like ourselves better. That's the way to do that. So anything that people are willing to share in that vein would be a service to everyone.
Yeah, and to just kind of piggyback off of that, people people tend to be very locally time biased. Um, I am. I'm definitely time biased. 2 years ago feels like forever, and 2 years ago feels like forever. Like it feels like there's a lot happening right here. But if you think about the opportunity for what we can build in terms of redefining the social fabric of the world and redefining the integrity of the financial layer tied to that social fabric, that is a 40 to 50-year journey minimum. Crypto has, I mean, I would argue until smart contracts came around, that really that first, 2008 to 2016 was still mostly like this proof of more of like a singular financial asset as opposed to an entire stack of tools. So if you consider 2016 as the starting point for redefining the social fabric and the financial agreements beyond just moving money from A to B and having like a store of value, like we're only call it 8 to 10 years into this journey. We're so early and so many ideas have failed and will continue to fail. So I'm trying to look at this journey as like how much information can we gather from real people to understand how we can design the future. And if you had 40 to 50 years to go out and do that and build that, how would you do it? and you would start by talking with people, right?
Mhm. Yeah. That is the question, is what we don't want to get so excited about our bags today that we actually sacrifice the kind of financial world that we want to wake it
Yep.
up in a decade or 40 years from now. We want to be imagining that now and building it, and I know that's what you're trying to do. So thank you.
And thanks for everyone part of the journey. We're just a couple individuals. We're just a couple individuals in the bazaar,
Yeah,
trying to make the dream
yeah,
happen.
yeah. And the bazaar is
It
bizarre.
is.
It's wild. It's a party. It's the
That
outpost
sounds like a
of
great episode name. The bazaar is bizarre. That write that down. Write that.